I'm hanging out with you on this Friday Eve. All right, so turnover, Eagles turnover, and I don't mean the kind where you fumble or you throw an interception, although there are way too many of them. But coaching and players here, Tone. So they've moved on from the a lot of the coaching staff. We mentioned earlier, even one of Jeff Stoutland's main assistants is gone. He's now with Cleveland. So they've moved on from inexperience, and it's clear that they prioritize guys who have been around for a little bit here this offseason. All right, so let's start with that. Sean Desai. He had 1 year of previous DC experience with Chicago Bears. He's no longer here. Vic Fangio is entering his 24th season as a defensive coordinator. Tracy Rocker, who we talked about a little bit earlier, he had 3 previous years going into last year. Clint Hurt has 10 going into this season. Brian Johnson, 0 years of experience as a DC. Kellen Moore is entering his 6th. Alex Taney, who is now with the Colts, had 0 years of experience as a quarterbacks coach. Doug Nussmeier is entering his 7th. So let's just start there. And by the way, Desai and Patricia have not been hired to any position. Wow. Brian Johnson took a demotion to be an offensive assistant with Washington. So that in and of itself is kind of interesting that nobody off of this staff has been elevated in a position elsewhere. So let's start there. I mean, clearly there was a lot going on. I mean, you've had players say that we were confused at times. You've had players say we began pointing fingers because we were confused at times. It was apparent on both sides of the ball, but it was really apparent on the defensive side when they made the move to go to Patricia, because I think he tried to install more stuff than maybe even they anticipated. The players were really, really lost. So I think that in and of itself these guys being around a little bit should bring some stability at least.
I mean, you would hope. But here's the thing, though. When you retain the head coach and you go through all this coaching turnover around him, it begs the question, how sustainable or stable is the environment really, right? If Nick Sirianni gets blown out, does that mean all those other guys leave again? You know what I mean? Or are you going to elevate one of those guys to the interim head coach and then decide long-term from there? I mean, those are the kind of things we have to think about, because Nick Sirianni, and as far as I'm concerned, he's hanging on by a thread.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. And again, for the Philadelphia Eagles to make the moves they've made, outing his entire staff when he's really only had one major setback as a head coach for the Philadelphia Eagles through a 3-year span, through 3 playoff bursts. He's only had one setback, and we just experienced that. Yet they jumped off the cliff and made all these knee-jerk reactions throughout the staff. It makes you question how they saw him from the beginning, right? It makes you question where their trust level is with him, from the beginning, right? If it was a guy you believed in, you don't off this entire staff the way they did and surround him with all these people who have, to be frank, more experience than him. That is not a good look to me, especially for Nick Sirianni. So again, I've said this time and time again, the Eagles don't trust him. The Eagles probably never did trust him. What the Eagles trust more than anything is their process. They trust their formula. They trust their procedures, right? They fired Doug Peterson, the Super Bowl winning head coach. That tells you right then and there. They trust their process more than they trust the people.
Interesting thought, because here's the thing. If they're going to lean into that, their process, are we really going to see philosophical changes? If they believe in their process so much, are we going to see them emphasize linebacker? Are we going to see them, maybe dole out a little bit more money for a safety? Probably not, right? If they have such a strong belief in the core of what they do, we very well could be looking at Zach Cunningham and Nakobe Dean coming back as your starting linebackers next year. We could be looking at Blankenship and somebody else who they have to fill in, if Sidney Brown's maybe not ready to go or whatever. You may not see the kind of significant changes that I think some Eagles fans want to see.
Right. Again, you don't make the moves they made if you trust Nick Sirianni. As simple as that. And he obviously wanted to keep his job because he said all the right things to make sure he wasn't on the first flight out with those guys, right? Need to remind you, they made him fire one of his groomsmen in his wedding, DK McDonald.
Right.
So when I think about it from that perspective, maybe it's pessimistic, maybe it's daunting for people, and I can understand if you don't like hearing it. But the fact of the matter is, Nick Sirianni is in a situation where it's not optimal. He's on thin ice. He has no control. He has no say-so over the offense, over the defense. He has no say-so over anything. So we think about it from that perspective, like they said at the press conference, what is it you do here again? You know what I mean? So I don't want to think about the Philadelphia Eagles in this context, but again, when you fire a Super Bowl winning head coach in Doug Peterson, and then you do what you did to Nick Sirianni at the first sign of trouble, you don't trust people. You believe you're the reason why your success is what it is. Otherwise, you would have kept Doug Peterson. Otherwise, you would have allowed Nick Sirianni to crawl himself out of this hole and leave with some dignity.
Right.
You didn't do that. You have more faith in your procedure than the person. And that is a slippery slope because you can be blinded by your process, right? That can prevent you from really looking in the mirror and really assessing what you did wrong in the situation.
Mm-hmm.
They have a lot of things to do this offseason. And I have a hard time seeing the light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to Nick Sirianni's future in Philadelphia. Me personally, that's just me. I don't know.
I'm with you. You sort of hinted at this, and I think it's the tough part of evaluating this is up until those 7 games, and that is very much like, other than that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln, right? I mean, I get it. But other than those last 7 games, you're talking about a guy who turned around a team that was a mess, frankly, the last year of Doug. I would have given Doug another year. But
same here, by the way.
Yeah, the last season of Doug was bad, and there were so many questions with Wentz. So they got rid of Wentz. Okay, at least you got rid of that distraction. But to start off 2-5 when it looked like that team was headed nowhere, and then right the ship and get them to 9-8, he deserves a lot of credit for that. And then I know the schedule wasn't hard in 2022. I get it. But they only lost 1 game that Jalen Hurts started that year. That's up until the Super Bowl. That's a phenomenal run.
Right. It's still the NFL. It's pretty hard to do.
It really is. And then lastly, 10-1, and I get it. It was sort of, we all watched it with our own eyes, and we knew some of this was false. It was like fake. But there's a lot more in his 3 years good than bad. Mm-hmm. But sometimes when you lose it, at least in certain situations, you don't get it back. Like, you're damaged by it. You know what I mean? Like, if you could be really good at something, and then you get in a situation where you just get it all gets twisted up. You lose your confidence, and you need to go somewhere else to get back to who you were. I don't know if Nick may be in that spot, or it's just he was really real with himself in the offseason and said, I did not do a good enough job here. And I'm not even talking about really football stuff. I mean, like, I didn't manage this well. I should have talked to this guy. I should have benched that guy. I have to be more whatever here and less here. I hope there was unbelievable soul searching. I think that had to be part of the process when they agreed to sort of let him come back, if you will. But thinking and seeing that you need to do things differently and really being able to apply it are 2 different things. Here's why. He can want to do things differently, but have the players down deep said, he's not the guy. And if that's the case, there's always going to be something missing. Like, all the guys who went to bat for him are older dudes who respect the way he treats them because he doesn't overwork them. He's not got Jason Kelsey doing busy work crap. Mm-hmm. He's going to give him a maintenance day if he looks beaten up. And those guys love that. Okay. And that's cool. It's good. They should. But it's the middle-aged guys and the younger guys who really have to buy into him, who really have to believe in him. I don't know that the buy-in's there. And really, last thing, I don't want to go on a speech here, but the last thing on this is that a reflection of Nick, or is it those guys? Is it the younger guys don't have right now what it takes to get there? We know Kelsey and Fletcher Cox do. We know that. I don't know that Jordan Davis has the mental fortitude to do it. It seems like a nice dude. That doesn't mean anything. I don't know that some of those guys have it. So that's also where Howie and Jeff have to say, that guy's a problem. We need to talk to that guy, or that guy needs to be gone, because you better clear out anybody who isn't on board. They can't be back.
Yeah, I mean, you raise a lot of good points, right? I boil it down to this. Players respect coaches who they believe can make them better, right? Just that 1%, that 2% better, right? They respect coaches who can help dig them out of holes, guys who show a propensity to fix, guys who know how to respond to adversity. You know, sometimes players are so entrenched into their roles, sometimes they don't even have the answers, right? So that's why you have coaches who can actually look at the macro and say, look, everyone, we're not as far off as we think. This is what we have to do, right? And not once do that, because again, let's think about this. This wasn't just a 2, 3, 4 game skid. This was an 8-week. This is half the season.
Yep.
This was an 8.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point. It's a half a season. Yep.
This was an 8-week.
You can't the playoffs.
Collapse.
100%. Yep.
8-week collapse. Let's really think about that. We watched this team. We as fans, we watched it in slow motion. We watched this team just fall and stumble. It was literally a slow death, a slow burn. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts, and not once could Nick Sirianni find an answer. Not once did he adjust his approach on offense. Not once did he shake things up. Players see that.
Yeah.
Players notice that. Again, this was an 8-week skid. I know what I think. I think this front office, they saw what was going on, and they said to themselves, he can't handle it. He can't fix it.
Correct.
He does not have the answers. Because if he did, we would have saw something. We would have saw something change.
Mm-hmm.
We would have saw something shake. I don't think those players believe in him. I definitely don't think the front office believes in him. I personally believe the front office allowed him to run this back because they don't want to deal with the PR nightmare of offing 2 head coaches with winning records. Getting rid of a head coach with a winning record of 60% or more, and getting rid of a Super Bowl winning head coach within the past 5 seasons. The Eagles don't want that pressure.
No, and just being
they don't want to have the answer to that.
Yeah, being labeled that team that you're just running guys in and out.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I firmly believe
if
he's
in fact
there because they don't want to deal with the PR nightmare. I believe that.
If you're right, that is terrible decision making. Honestly,
because think about it. Think about it. He was everything went so bad. You felt the need to fire everybody. Except for him.
Yeah.
Make that make sense. If he was so bad,
here's how.
If everything was so bad, why not just X him out and just say, look, everything was terrible. We realized he really wasn't the guy, and we're moving on. I can respect that move. That's the courage of your convictions.
Yeah.
But when you half-step it, when you straddle the fence like this, now I feel like you have ulterior motives behind it.
Well, let me give you 2 thoughts off of that. One, the only way that it makes sense is if Jeffrey and Howie were the ones who wanted those guys as assistant coaches. Okay. If they were their hires, so to speak. I'm not saying Nick didn't have input, but if they look at it and they're like, man, we saddled this guy with 2 stiffs. Maybe he deserves another opportunity. I'm just giving you like a devil's advocate. Okay.
No, that's reasonable.
Right.
That's very reasonable because I mean the rumors since he's been here is that he doesn't really have as much control as we think or as much as they portray him to have. You know, they love parading, you know, Nick's decisions. Oh yeah, Nick, you know, Nick decided the Sean Desai thing, and you know, Nick decided on this coach or that. They love parading him around as if he's a chief decision maker when we know he's not. So maybe you're right. I think that's a reasonable retort to what I'm saying. So I don't think that's off base at all. It's very plausible.
The only thing I would say also off of that is if I want to go back to your thought of they just didn't want the PR nightmare. The problem with that kind of thinking is, man, if this blows up this year, the PR pushback that you're going to get off of the way this year being bad is way worse than if you just recognized the problem and made a change right away, even if it was unpopular at the time. You know what I mean? Like it's very short-sighted that you're worried about a pushback publicly, because what you're going to get this year is going to be 1,000 times worse.
Here's what I'll say to that. Here's what I'll say to that, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if I would say 1,000 times worse, but I will say this. You would have took your medicine earlier than having to take it later if you would have got them out of the building quicker. You know what I mean? You would have pulled you would have pulled the Band-Aid off quicker. Right?
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Right. So to your point, this is what I think is a potential to happen. Remember, they surrounded him with all these experienced people. Yep. The Philadelphia Eagles are notorious for hedging their bet. They hire Sean Desai. What do they do a few weeks later or a month later? Patricia. Huh? The moment they did that, I thought to myself, are you hedging your bet? That's the first thing I thought about.
Yeah.
So that was that. So again, they've shown the propensity to always hedge their bet. Remember, Jalen Hurts after year one as a starter, it was mediocre. Let's be honest. Jalen Hurts had a mediocre rookie season, not rookie, but a mediocre first year starting. He wasn't awful, but he wasn't great either. You remember that year they had 2 first-round picks.
Yeah.
And they were ready to empty the tank on Russell Wilson. Mm-hmm. It's documented that they tried to make a play for him. They tried to make a play for Deshaun Watson. It's documented. Obviously, Russell Wilson vetoed the move, and Deshaun Watson went to Cleveland because they gave him a fully guaranteed contract. Mm-hmm. So they were, again, hedging their bets, right? I wouldn't be surprised if the reason they brought in a guy like Vic Fangio with all their experience, bringing in a guy like Kellen Moore, a guy that they've actually interviewed in 2021 when they brought in Nick Sirianni.
Yep.
They interviewed him too. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be surprised if things start off slow, or if this team starts off with a 3-4 record, or a 2-5 record, however you want to slice it. If they start off, if come week 8 or week 7 they're under 500, I wouldn't be surprised if they X Nick Sirianni out, they elevate Kellen Moore to be the interim head coach.
Yeah.
And then they can ride through the season with that staff still. You can justify the fire then. And then you make Kellen Moore your full-time head coach. That way you don't have to get rid of your entire staff completely. That's their easiest path out of Nick Sirianni if things go south. Okay. Because you can justify that. You can make sense of that.
I can see what you're I'm picking up what you're putting down, man.
Yeah, and look, this is me putting my tinfoil hat on. So
I get you. But so on top of the coaching part of it, which is a lot, potentially 10 different players. So 3 on the offensive side. You could have a change at center, which means you're going to have a change at guard, and you could potentially have a change at running back. So there's 3 positions right there.
And wide receiver 3.
True. Yeah. If you consider 3 wide out starters, true. That's true. You could have 4.
Yeah. Depending on if you're, most teams operate out of 11 personnel.
Yeah.
So that's 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 1 running back.
Right.
So, yeah.
You could also have 7 on the defensive side, depending on, again, some of this is contingent on Fletcher Cox coming back and blah, blah, blah. But you could have a lot of, if you make a move on Zach Cunningham, if you make a move, if the Kobe isn't your starter, that's a lot. That's a lot. It feels very, very much in flux rather than settled. So if that side has that many, now some people say, hey, good riddance. You're getting rid of you're chopping a lot of fat off. It's smart. Do it, whatever. But there are others that would say it's really hard to win when you're changing that much. Like the Chiefs, yes, they did a lot on the defensive side. Number one, they were able to do that because they had Chris Jones, because they drafted incredibly well. Karlaftis, McDuffie, Snead, others, Reed. They drafted really, really well. We don't know yet. We think Jalen Carter's good, but there's a lot of guys where the jury's out still. And then they're going to have to get all of this right this year on top of it.
Yeah, the Philadelphia Eagles are the most unstable program in the NFL, in the NFC right now in terms of the top 7 teams or the top 10 teams.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about the top 10 power rankings in the NFC. Yeah. But when I look at the 49ers, I see stability. When I look at the Lions, I see stability. When I look at the Packers, I see stability. Even the Cowboys, I see more stability. The Rams, I see stability. The Bucks, debatable.
Mhm.
But the Eagles, the whole coaching staff has changed. Your whole defense is going to be having a whole new look. You're going to be changing out 4 bodies on offense, probably, right?
Mhm.
This is not, this isn't Madden. This isn't something that you're just going to like, click a few buttons and all of a sudden now you're back in the mix. The competition got stiffer and you got worse. We got to keep it real with ourselves here.
Yeah, and I think too, you also have to ask yourself, and again, a lot. We haven't gotten anywhere. We're sitting here.
Right. It's so early. It's still early in the offseason. Yeah, very early. We haven't even got to the combine yet.
They lack talent on the defensive side of the ball. They just do. So you're going to have to swing and either hit home runs or doubles or triples or singles and not miss if you're Howie.
The room for error is gone.
There are. And you're not in a depth mode thing. Like you could use a second rounder on Tyler Steen last year. You could use a second rounder on Cam Jurgens the year before that. Okay, that's fine. You kind of loaded at other places. You're not loaded anymore. Yeah. These are guys who you're going to draft and they'll come right in and play.
Yeah. You need guys that can be impact players right away. And Matt Lombardo said something really key. Through all the turbulence that we're talking about, right? Through all the coaching turnover, all the roster turnover, if Jalen Hurts comes back and is sharp, all of this can be a smoother ride than we anticipated.
Oh, he covers up a lot of words. Jalen Hurts is deodorant next year.
He has to be the ultimate deodorant.
If your defense is mediocre, which I actually wouldn't, I'd be okay if they were mediocre. I'm telling you the truth.
They weren't mediocre last year. They were worse than that.
Way below mediocre.
Right.
Your defense is mediocre, and then the offense is really high functioning. Yeah, you can win in the league that way. You can. Now, I think will it get to you once you get deeper into the playoffs? That's where I think it could end up biting you. But you could see them have a successful offseason if Jalen's right. If they're right with that, and that might be the way they're thinking. Like they're savvy enough, I think, front office wise, to know. Look, we need a lot on defense. Let's get a couple of these right, start chipping away at it, and within 2 years we can sort of retool this thing. But what we know we have with the quarterback and the receivers and and the line is we could be good on offense again with the right guy.
Yeah. Jalen Hurts has to come back sharp. It's no ifs, ands, or buts, or maybe he has to come back sharp. He has to. Mm-hmm. This is something it's death, taxes, and Jalen Hurts. It has to be guaranteed. Yeah. He has to come back sharper than ever. Because if he comes back sharp, like you said, it can cover up a lot of warts. And it can carry you through the season. If he's on, then it'll make fixing this thing way smoother, because the last thing you have to worry about is, okay, my offense is going to continue to have a flow. They're going to continue to put up points. Can my defense become opportunistic and make plays here and there, right? Can they get a takeaway there? Can they make a couple plays? Jalen Hurts, and I know I'm repeating it, but it's so imperative that Jalen Hurts comes back better than ever.
Yeah.
He has to.
I was thinking about this because I saw a PFF rate. Jordan Mailata, I think, graded out like unbelievably high last year.
Yeah, top 3 tackle, and that was only behind Trent Williams and Penny Sewell. Both got, Trent Williams was a first-team All-Pro left tackle, Penny Sewell first-team All-Pro right tackle, and then Mailata's right behind those guys.
All right, so you think about that. So you have a premier left tackle.
Mm-hmm.
You have Landon Dickerson, who's been a 2-time Pro Bowler in his 3 years so far. Another guy that's going to have to get paid soon too, which we don't talk about very much. But you have those 2 guys. You still have Lane Johnson, arguably the best right tackle in football. Even if Kelsey leaves, and I know there's going to be transition with Jurgens, and there's going to be Steen, I think ultimately is your other guard. It's still a really good line.
Yeah, you could do a lot worse. You could do a lot worse. But that middle, the gut, that's the last thing. Quarterbacks hate when the middle of the pocket collapse.
Yeah, the pressure up the middle, any quarterback will tell you, is the hardest kind of pressure.
Exactly. So losing, if you lose Kelsey, okay, Jurgens moves over, And then, okay, can Tyler Steen step in? I mean, you have questions. I mean, Cam Jurgens has starting experience, but we haven't seen him as our center quite yet. We saw him in a couple of preseason games, but and that seems more like a natural position for him. But overall, like you said, Mailata, Landon Dickerson, Lane Johnson right there, who they're going to have to start to consider thinking about the future beyond him. It's not going to be the worst offensive line, but it's not going to be the best. With those three guys, is it still a top 10 O-line? I would say so with those three guys.
I definitely say top 10. Yeah.
But top 5, we may have to debate it. If you lose Kelsey and then you move Jurgens and you got to figure out right guard.
Yeah. And this is also where, you know what you have at receiver, but you don't have enough at receiver. In other words, you got to add to that position. You got to add to the backup tight end. The thing is,
there's no depth there at all.
You got to, but you're going to have to prioritize because there's so much needed on the defense side of the ball. At what point, where do you start in terms of whether it's draft or free agents? How much of a priority is it money-wise to start getting some of the depth there? These are all the things. Another thing that Howie's going to have to parse out, and I'm sure they're in the process of doing so. But how do you prioritize that if you have so many glaring needs right now in terms of starters?
That's why I'm really curious to see how this thing goes. Once free agency passes, I'm going to be able to really kind of think a little more clearer. But as of right now, man, I don't know what the first move is going to be. But actually, the first move has been made. They brought in some guy, Julian. Julian Okora. Brought him in. He's just a guy as of right now. No major impact, even on the team he was on. Buckle up, Eagles fans. It's going to be a hell of an offseason.
It is. I mean, we haven't been really in this spot in a couple of years. You were in it the year they made the coaching change and brought Nick in, where it was going to be a very critical offseason because of personnel and whatnot. But we haven't been in this spot in a couple of years now. And this is where Howie's got to really, and his staff have really got to get it right, because there isn't any wiggle room. If they don't, I think they're going to have a hard time making the playoffs.
Absolutely.
And that's where it's at. All right. So we'll come back. We're going to run through a bunch of different things. Flyers, Sixers, baseball as well. Then we have our NFL segment. In the NFL segment, we will do our NFC power rankings. And then we're going to kind of jump around a little bit in the last segment with a bunch of different things that we usually do to kind of close it out. And in part, must-watch player in each sport, non-Philadelphia. Who are the guys that if you're flipping around, that you're going to stay if X is playing in their sport? All right, we'll do that in the last segment. But like I said, a lot of Flyers, Sixers, Phillies when we come back. All right, let's talk about Pro Action Restoration. Pro Action Restoration is the place you turn to if your home, your property, or your business goes through the pain and the inconvenience of water, fire, smoke, mold damage. You know how trying that can be, right? And they are the people that can handle it. The beauty is Pro Action Restoration is on call 24 hours, 7 days a week to assist. I went through it. I had some water damage in the house. And the first thing they did was they got out here quickly. They recognized the problem. They fixed the problem so it wouldn't occur again. And then they went about taking care of the damage. And they worked in conjunction with my insurance company, which was great. It was such a relief. It was one less headache in a very stressful situation. Pro Action Restoration is licensed, bonded, fully insured, serving the tri-state area for more than 2 decades. Pro Action will work in conjunction with the insurance company, as I mentioned, and they handle everything: water, fire, smoke damage, mold remediation, even beyond. They can handle it. Give them a call, 610-623-3760, 610-623-3760, or online at proactionrestoration.com. That's Pro Action